I don't know why I got given a drum, but I took to it. You know, the novelty didn't wear off quite as quick as other things. So to the extent that, you know, 2 years later, when I was 5, my uncles, the same uncles, made me a drum kit because I'd obviously showed some kind of interest in it. So they made me this drum kit that fitted in a suitcase, which I used to, from the age of 5 till 11, play at any opportunity. My older brother and my older sister, Clive and Carol. Clive, I shared a room with. I remember he had a train set, which I kind of, as he grew out of it, I kind of coveted, you know, and that's the train set that I always did say that I sold to get my drums, first proper set of drums. And, you know, only about 10 years ago, he said to me, "You realize they were my trains you sold. They weren't even your trains." I was still at grammar school at this point, Chiswick County Grammar School, and my mum, who had befriended Barbara Speake, who was running a dancing school, wanted to open an agency, realising that the dancing school was a little bit limiting, and there was a need for commercial television, for kids for adverts, kids for pantomimes. So my mum said, who'd left the toy shop, said, "Oh, I'll have a go at doing that." And so she did the business from home for a while in Hounslow. And I remember her getting one call for could she send some kids under 15 for the role of the Artful Dodger in this new musical. It was in its 3rd year at that point in London, Oliver. Anyway, about 7 months into my contract, my voice broke, and I had a terrible night, which I'll never forget. I went on stage to sing Consider Yourself, and my voice broke during the middle of the song. And I didn't know what was happening to me. And the audience, the orchestra leader was looking at me like this, and the conductor was saying, "What the hell's going on?" And at the interval, I went to the stage manager and said, "Please let me go home. I can't do this anymore." He said, "Well, finish the night out, and then that's it." And that kept me from reading scripts for years and years. And all the way through the early Genesis days, even when I was singing and I was doing videos and they were saying, "You know, you're quite funny, you know, you should act." I was saying, no, thank you. I've had a taste of that, and I don't ever want to do it again. We were a band in search of gigs. We were playing for fun, you know, we had no income. And Brian Chatton, who the keyboard player, was up at the Chasse one night drinking when these two guys put it about that they were looking for a band, you know, and Brian said, "Oh, I got a band, I'm in a band, you know, we need the job." These guys came along and heard us play just in rehearsal and said, "Oh yes, you're very good, you know, would you like to come and hear more?" So we went to their place in Hampstead, and you know, we heard their demos and we went away and rehearsed them, and we made this record as Flaming Youth, which was, we were rechristened Flaming Youth. We were called Hickory, I think, before that. And we went and recorded the album, and the album came out to a mammoth launch at the planetarium, because it was all cosmic, you know, about, you know, the second arc leaving a doomed Earth and going to the stars, and you know, very cliched now. It was cliched then, really, but it was cliched now. But the album, we were tremendous reviews. I mean, we were Album of the Month in Melody Maker, and we all thought, "Oh, this is fantastic." And then we went out to do some gigs, and it all fell flat. I mean, we just couldn't get work, really. So eventually I was starting to look at other places to get work, and I answered an advert in the Melody Maker, which said drummer wanted, sensitive to acoustic music, and also 12-string guitar player, sensitive to acoustic music. So I said to my mate Ronnie, we should go for this. And it said Tony Stratton Smith, who I had met years before in a band prior to Genesis, or prior to Flaming Youth and Hickory. So when I saw this advert in the Melody Maker, and it said his name, I sort of went to the marquee, went to the bar and said, "Tony, you know, I'm a drummer, I need a job." And he said, "Well, these guys are very fussy, so you'd have to go for the audition." So I said, "Who is it?" He said, "It's Genesis." So I said, "Okay, I see their name on the back pages of Melody Maker all the time." "Yes, well, they're very eccentric, but they really know what they want." When we auditioned, they just put up 2 or 3 different areas that would test me, you know. One thing was a little heavier, one thing was a little lighter, one thing was kind of a bit more experimental. And then they took me into the living room to listen to the album, to sort of see what I thought of it. And my first impressions was a music that was very soft around the edges. And they had some harmonies, which of course didn't really feature very much in our work later, particularly. But I remember thinking Crosby, Stills and Nash, you know, because Crosby, Stills and Nash had just really had their first big album. So harmonies, those kind of harmonies were kind of in your face. And I thought, wow, very musical, but very Crosby, Stills and Nash vocally. I mean, even if I hadn't liked it, I would probably have done it because it was work. Well, Rutherford had a dressing gown on, which looked more like a smoking jacket, you know, like one of those sort of crushed velvet Noel Coward jobs. But it was probably a dressing gown, give me his credit. And he had slippers on. Peter had his bass drum, his infamous bass drum, which we slowly got rid of. But he kind of seemed a little bit eccentric. And Tony looked the tortured artist. You know, he didn't say much. And he had the sort of, you know, sort of Beethoven look. But I really didn't know what to make of them other than that. I mean, they seemed very well educated, which they were. I was from a drama school, therefore not. And in a way, I was the kind of the class, you know, it's been cliche, but the class clown, you know. When I joined the band, I was the guy that made the jokes. And it was very uptight, very intense, you know, when I started to play with them. First thing they did was go on holiday for 2 weeks when I joined. And then we reconvened at the Farnham Maltings, which Rutherford's dad had a kind of hand in getting us. And we rehearsed in this place covered in pigeon shit, you know, for about 6 weeks and wrote what was to become Nursery Crime. There was a column in Melody Maker in the 60s and 70s called the Raver column, which was kind of a gossip column about what was happening in clubs and who to watch and who was playing great. And all I wanted to do was be mentioned in that column. It meant that Chris Welch, who was the drummer that wrote that column, it meant that someone was listening to me, you know, as a drummer. And that was the pinnacle of success as far as I was concerned. Well, I guess the first one would have been The Fox's Head, because that was the cover of Foxtrot. And I remember in Dublin, the stadium in Dublin, boxing stadium, we played, and we were playing, I guess, I don't even know what tune it would have been, probably Musical Box, which was from the album prior to that, Foxtrot. But he came out with the fox's head and the woman's dress, you know. And it was, what is he, what the... And that reached a peak with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, when there was many, many costumes, and to the point where he couldn't get a microphone near enough to his mouth to sing the songs, or it would get caught up, which would stop him from being able to sing. And at that point, I just thought, oh God, you know. And then it became such a show with the slides that's all people talked about. You'd rush out and buy a review because you'd heard it was good, and in fact, all it mentioned was the visuals, you know, which is not a bad thing now. You know, but then I'm older now. But then I kind of thought, oh shit, another reviewer, they didn't mention me, the drummer. They didn't mention the music at all, you know. I mean, that's me saying that. It wasn't like from ego kind of thing. It was actually just the fact that they just overlooked a lot of stuff that really was the prime reason for us being there. We'd been going out with each other on and off throughout the drama school years, and even when we weren't together, I used to go and spend time with the family because I loved her mother. Her mother was a wonderful woman, and I got on great with her father, and her brother was a great pal of mine too. So, you know, even though we weren't going out with each other, she was going out with one of the other boys from school or something. You know, it was pretty easy to hang out with each other, even if you weren't going out with each other. So we were kind of close, you know. Then her father died, her mother went to Vancouver, and all the family went. And that was that. And I guess when I went through Vancouver, I looked them up, because I loved, you know, I wanted to see her mother apart from anything else. And she wasn't very happy in Vancouver, so I said, well, why don't you come back to England and with Jolie, you know, and I'll adopt Jolie and we can get married, kind of. That cuts a long story short. But I have to say that my life was being a musician, and that takes you away from home. And if you're with someone that doesn't like to be alone, it's not the thing it's not the person to be with, you know. And it came at a time when 1977, with Genesis, we actually looked at America and said, if we're ever going to run at a profit instead of a loss, if we're ever going to do this thing properly, we really have to play places that we've never played, and it's a huge country. And we're going to have to do the same kind of thing in Europe, you know, and really try and make a concerted effort to crack America. And I remember sitting at home. I mean, Simon was a baby at this point. He'd been born, and I remember saying, listen, to do this, for us to live a comfortable life rather than struggling all the time. I mean, this isn't my very words, I don't remember how I said it, but basically the gist was, we're going to have to do 3 American tours, 3 3-month American tours next year, and 2 European tours, and maybe there's talk of a Japanese tour for a couple of weeks. So, you know, if we're going to do this as a band, that's what we're going to have to do. And she said, well, if you do that, we're not going to be together this time next year. And we did do it, and we weren't. So it was me being on the road, I guess, and she didn't like being on her own, so she met somebody else, and, you know, it all fell apart, you know. When Peter left, the first thing I remember saying to the other guys is, let's just be instrumental. Let's just do it without a singer. That way they'll hear the music, right? That was the very first thing. Tony and I said, don't be stupid, boy, we write songs, you know, we need a singer. Anyway, it was suggested, why don't I give it a go? And I said, well, the whole idea is alien to me, but if we can find a drummer that I like, perhaps it's not quite so alien. So Bill Rutherford, who had been in the original Yes, and who was a great friend of mine by this point, he'd been playing with Brand X as percussionist, and he'd heard that we were looking for a drummer, and he suggested himself. And I said, well, I didn't think you'd want to do that, you know, being down that road with Yes and Crimson. And he said, oh, no, I'll do it for a while, till you find somebody else, you know, till you get your feet on the ground. So finally, I'd found a drummer that I respected and admired, that I could actually listen to playing without me wanting to say, do it this way, you know. And we started rehearsing, and we did our first gig in London, Ontario. And I remember on the way to the gig that I was terrified. I mean, not of the singing, but of just of how the audience would react to me, because they loved Peter. And he was great with an audience. He talked to the audience, and they kind of listened like this. And at the end of each song, the audience just erupted into applause. I mean, I think it was because I'd come from within the group, so they knew me, and also they wanted it to work. They didn't want their group to split up, you know. So one way or the other, it worked. Richard Williams used to be editor of Melody Maker, was an A&R man at Ireland, and he had this jazz kind of funk rock, a bit like Average White Band, but not quite. He was trying to get off the ground at Ireland, and they were looking for a drummer. And someone had suggested Bill Rutherford, and he had suggested me, Richard Williams had, as a possibility of seeing, you know. And I went down there one afternoon to Island Studios to play with them. And we just played for hours. I mean, this was heaven for me. I was playing, you know, music with a groove, where Genesis wasn't really a groove band at that point. And, you know, at that point I would have been quite happy to have left Genesis and just did Brand X. But I saw the sense of trying to keep both together, because this wasn't, they weren't offering me anything, you know. I had to make a living, because obviously I was married at this point. We eventually started to make a record with Ireland called, I think it was Ireland, called Unorthodox Behaviour. And I played on a couple of records. Moroccan Roll was the next one. We went on tour in '78 to America. I played some English shows, but lots of English gigs, actually. Then we first went to America. We did 12 shows in one of the Genesis breaks. And that was it then. Just life at Genesis was getting too hectic, and they wanted to tour more. Brand X did, and I couldn't do that. Nice to visit, though. Wouldn't want to live there. It's the way I used to think about it. Obviously, David Green and Norma Heyman, they wanted to use all their aces, you know, and here they were with someone that was very popular at the time and was acting. You know, it made sense. And I said, well, no, you know, I'm going to come in to that film with enough baggage of people trying to forget I'm Phil Collins and think I'm Buster without actually hearing my voice singing. You know, I want people to I want to stand or fall as an actor in this film. Then I remember one day, as they were starting to put music together, what was popular at the time, you know, relative to the film, I said, well, you know, Groovy Kind of Love was a big hit for the Mindbenders, 65, 66. We should have that, because it's like groovy kind of Buster and June. Have it on the radio in the background. Just like a little ballad, a different kind of version, but just as a ballad. And David said, well, what do you mean? Show. I said, okay, I'll do a little tape for you, show you exactly what I mean. And I literally was doing it as a demo to show them so they could get it done by other guys, other singers, and with an orchestra or something. So I called up Tony Banks because he didn't know the chords. And I called up Tony and I said, do you know the chords for Groovy Kind of Love? And he said, yeah. So I wrote it down, and I just did literally a half-hour demo. And I sent it to them saying, this is what the kind of thing I was talking about. Anyway, I went to see a rough cut of the film about a month later, and over my arrest at the end of the film, there's my Groovy Kind of Love. And I said, what? That's not where it's supposed to. He said, yeah, I know, it works, doesn't it? I said, yes, it works, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be somewhere hidden and not me. I didn't want my voice heard till the end. Anyway, they said, well, it works. And that's where it stayed. So in the end, I was pleased because, in the end it didn't hurt the film at all. Obviously it had 2 number ones, 2 Arts and Groovy Kind of Love. 2 Arts was nominated for an Oscar, and it won the Golden Globe, and it won the Grammy. It was nice after the thing. Annie Lennox sent me a lovely note, saying she didn't realise, she was involved in it so much that having watched it, she didn't realise just how good it was, And Ozzy Osbourne sent me a present, and it was very nice. Very nice. I really had a great time. I mean, it's always, a lot of those people I've played with before in similar circumstances, like Joe Cocker and Eric and Paul McCartney and people like that. But a lot of people I hadn't even met, and it was just great to sort of sit there and just play the last 30 years of popular music with the people that wrote the songs and sang the songs, and all I had to do was play drums, And everyone says, everybody I've seen that says, oh, I saw you, you look like you're having a good time. I mean, I was. It was nothing like work. I was just, this is the best gig in the world, for God's sake. With this record, my new record, for example, I said to the engineer, Alan, and Rob, I said, I don't want to be spending 2 days on a mix. This is what everybody does now. We did it with Genesis, and some people, they leave it up for a week and come in for a few hours. I don't want to do that. I want to do 2 or 3 songs a day. I want to put the song up. I want to say, that sounds great. That needs to be a bit louder. Push that there. That's it. Let's put it to bed. And then the next day, if we want to, we can come back to it without having invested all this time in it. And we did 3 or 4 songs a day on that record. And nobody had ever done it like that before. All the guys that I'm working with said, this is fun, isn't it? I said, well, yes. This is the way they used to do it. In the 60s, this is the way they had to do it. And that's the way I always wanted to make my records. But you do get sidetracked, and eventually you end up having to leave it up that night after having worked on it all day, because someone has been listening to a bass drum for 3 hours. Ding, 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 ding. More top. Ding, ding, ding. And you just get so depressed by it all. So the perfectionist thing is really not me at all. I did interviews just recently for the record, and especially the Germans. They say, well, you're known as a perfectionist. I say, no, wait a second. I'm not known as a perfectionist. Well, I am, but that's not the truth. I just want the record to sound good, and I don't, if it's too polished and shiny and sounds sterile, then that's not what I want at all. I don't want that. I just want it to sound the way it should sound. That album has been tarnished, and even I have to think about it twice, but it's been tarnished with the Divorce album. But actually there's a lot of optimistic songs on that album, and there's lots of fun. It's not all doom and depression. So, it's only the little sort of feedback that you get of someone being frustrated about, because I'm able to put a side of the story. But really, it's just a bunch of songs about what happened to me. I'm not putting my side of the story. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just writing songs about how I felt, All I want is the happiest family that I could possibly have. And I have Lily, who's fantastic, and Jodie and Simon, who have grown up to be such great, adults. And we're all getting on great. Everybody likes everybody else, and this is a happy family. And that's really all I want now. And that's all I really want for Jill. And that's all I really want for Andy. I don't want anybody to be sort of a casualty on the curb. I want them to pick up their life and just realise that this happened, and we have to move on with it. Now it's happened, and sometimes it's easier said than done, but it's really, You know, that's any way I can look at it. I said, okay, well, I'll do the thing with Sting, and that'll be that. Then Harvey Goldsmith told Tony that it was actually, had you thought about the possibility of it being possible to get Concord and actually do both shows and therefore play with your mates in Philadelphia? And I said, well, yeah, okay. Who else is doing it? Because I don't really want to be the only one doing it, you know. I don't want to show off, you know. And they said, oh, no, Duran Duran are doing London and Power Station are doing America. So there's some, you know, John Taylor and one of the other guys were in both bands. So I said, okay, well, if it's possible, I'll do it. Anyway, so we went to Wembley and did the thing with Sting and me, and it was blisteringly hot. The white stage, it was so hot. And of course, it had all started in the morning with Status Quo, I think. And then I just waited around after me and Sting finished. And I made a terrible mistake on Against All Odds on the piano. I thought, oh God, what a good start to the day this is. And then I went backstage and I just waited. I remember Dire Straits going on. I remember U2. I didn't really sort of watch anybody because I was waiting to leave. And eventually I got a helicopter to Heathrow. And then when I landed in the helicopter at Heathrow, all the baggage handlers were out to wave goodbye, which I thought was very, very sweet, you know. Got on Concorde without having going through the terminal, which was, you know, pretty touch and go. And then sat down and just waited. Anyway, we landed at Kennedy, and they said, you're going to have to go through customs and immigration. And sort of, I said, okay. And they said, well, we're going to try and get you straight off, but they don't do this, not even for royalty, you know. But I guess the whole thing of the day had somehow made everybody think, the hell with it. Let him go, he's got to get to Philadelphia for the gig, you know. Anyway, I went on stage. I can't remember what was first. I think probably I was first. I can't remember now. I went on stage and kind of said, funny old world, isn't it? You know, I was in London today and here I am, you know. And I guess the audience were cheered and stuff. I don't remember that. I was just like, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to play Against All Odds correctly this time. You know, I had my second chance to play it right. But it was not really until the next day, in spite of all that, and it was just a logistical exercise, doing this, doing that, did it. Oh, okay. The next day was when you saw how big an event it was and how big a global, you know, thing. Everybody was talking about it. It was on the front page of all the newspapers, and it was a success. Because I remember thinking it would never happen. This would never happen. So it was interesting, and people are still asking me if I've recovered. You know, it's funny. It's one of those things where I guess it was an inhuman act of endurance, but it was kind of great. I can play with him, and I can do this, and I can do that. I'm happy, you know. A couple of years ago, I had this ear problem, and which is still with me, which is what they call sudden deafness, and that kind of has prevented me from going out on tour. I can do shows, I can sing, you know, it doesn't have any problem here singing and stuff. I mean, when I first came back from Los Angeles, which is where I got it, when I was recording Can't Stop Loving You and Least You Can Do, I'd just done a week of recording there, and on the Friday of that week, this ear just closed up. Opened up a couple of times, but closed up and never came back. You know, it's like that to this day. But when I came back here and I had to listen via ISDN lines to mixes that they were doing in America, it was the first time I'd heard music like this, and it was just, my God, you know, I can't hear anything out of this ear, and this ear was distorting because it was suddenly being overworked. You know, it was kind of that to me, okay, well, my life is going to have to change, you know. And in a way, I know it sounds a little strange, but in a way I felt, I'm not a very religious person. I mean, I believe that there is something that guides us, and I'm a believer, but I'm not specifically religious. I have a belief, I have, you know, faith in something, but I really believe that whatever it was sort of, hey, slow down, boy, change your life, you know, got a baby on the way, it's time to just change, you know, and you're not going to stop, are you? I just carry on, you know, so I needed a bit of a clip round the ear to sort of remind me. That's the way I've looked at it. I get very precious, you know, when we go on the road and my new babies are given to the band to play. I get very precious about it. I go around watching people's hands and say, I didn't play that note. That note shouldn't be played. I didn't play it like this, like a real keyboard player, because I'm not. I played it like this, because that's how I made the sound, you know. So I'm very specific. You know, everything is there for a reason, you know. And so I have to go around and, you know, put notes under the door when I've listened to the tape of the gig the night before. In fact, I used to be much worse than I am now. Now I know that gigs are just something, they're a moment in time. You try your best, they enjoy it, they don't enjoy it. It was a great night, you should have been there, or it'll be better tonight. There's no point in dwelling over it, but I used to listen to the gig after the gig. I used to listen to the tape, make notes for everybody, slip them under the door, next day we'd have a rehearsal. But I was in Zermatt, which is, you know, the Matterhorn basically. We were up there for a weekend skiing. And, you know, after you've been skiing, you kind of, you know, you get pampered, you sort of have a massage, you know. So this guy that we know up there, Ron, he has the radio on sometimes, which is all Swiss German, or he has some music, you know, and sometimes it's sort of kind of ambient music, and sometimes, well, this time it was really dodgy CD he had on, sort of old country and western stuff. And I was like, and suddenly though, this song came on with Leo Sayer version, 'cause I can't stop loving you. And I thought, that's a nice song. Great, I haven't heard that for years. What a great song. So you're leaving. Nice chords, you know. So I went in the steam room, you know, kind of started singing it. I thought, what else can you do with that? You know, so you're leaving in the morning. Kind of like a policey type rhythm. Every breath you take type of thing, yeah. Anyway, someone outside who was trying to sleep, you know, after they'd had their steam, said, "Shut up!" Which I never forget, because I was only singing, you know. But, so I came out, and I was again, you know, I was kind of singing the song over and over and over to myself. When we got back here after the weekend, I put down the demo. I started off with a demo of the original tempo, you know, i.e. Leo Sayer's tempo. And I liked that. But I thought I really should try to do something different with it. So I started to fool around with this other, more up-tempo idea. There was 3 songs I recorded in LA 2 years ago. Least You Can Do, Can't Stop Loving You, and a version of Tears of a Clown, Smokey Robinson thing. And we weren't going to use any of those on this record. But we had so much fun doing this record, and we kind of were finished so quickly with it that we thought we'd bring over those hard drives with that music on it and mix it just to put them in the pot with the other lot, you know. And as we started to remix them, even though they were recorded with a live group as opposed to me here, they just sort of sounded great. And then, ironically, everybody that heard the record, the one song I didn't write was the one they liked the most, you know, which is Can't Stop Loving You. I have a theatrical agent, Hilary Shaw, and when I was doing acting, when I was acting more, you know, she obviously was getting lots of calls, or I was getting lots of auditions, you know. I mean, it was really a great levelling experience, you know. I mean, I was kind of maybe a 7 or 8 on the ladder in music. And I started off on level 1 on the ladder, you know, in terms of acting. So I was going around having lunches and dinners with people and meeting writers, meeting directors, who all wanted to meet me because I was a rock star. And all I wanted to do was meet them to get work. But within a couple of months, I'd got this phone call from Hilary saying that Chris Montan, who was now the president of Walt Disney Music, but then the music coordinator for all the movies, he found Celine Dion in Canada and put her as the Beauty and the Beast, to do the Beauty and the Beast singer with Peebo Bryson. You know, he's got a fantastic ear. I mean, he just decides, he gets the right person to do the music for the movie. He would have been the one that maybe got Elton for Lion King, you know, things like that. Anyway, he called up Hilary and said that we'd like to discuss, see if Phil would like to do the music for an upcoming film we're doing, Tarzan. I said, well, I don't know if I can do this. I can't be Alan Menken, you know. I mean, he had like every film that he did with Disney got an Oscar. I can't do that. I mean, you really don't want me, because I only do what I do, you know. And they said, well, no, we'd like to talk to you about it. So Chris Montana, the directors, and Tom Schumacher and Hillary came over to the hotel in Geneva, and we met. And they said, would you do it? And I said, well, I said, I don't think I can do what Alan Menken does. I can't be that kind of writer. And he said, well, what we want you to do is be you. That's why we're asking you, because we want you to write music like the way, like you write. So I went away, feeling 10 foot tall, thinking, well, if they think I can do it, I'm sure I can do it. But very, very nervous about it. I mean, it wasn't until I started to write that I thought, okay, that actually kind of sounds good. And I wrote You'll Be in My Heart, and I demoed it, and I called Chris on the phone, because most of the time, before I had this baby, which is my video conference link up, which is with the stay installed, so I can send them music digitally and they can hear it and they can send me stuff. I was playing it over the phone, I'd put my phone up. He was in his car, I'd say, what do you think of this? And I'll never forget this, because he said, chorus is spectacular, Phil, but the verse is not there yet. And I didn't know this guy, and I thought that was fantastic of him to be that brave, because he didn't know how I was going to react. Anyway, we kind of bonded at that moment, and we've been honest with each other ever since. But, step by step, I delivered them a song. Son of Man actually was the first song I think I delivered to them. And Chris told me that when he heard it, he just went round and he said, listen to this. And, they were very, very pleased. And I was thrilled that I kind of felt that I raised my game, because I was so nervous about it and so apprehensive. I raised my game and threw myself 100% into it. Jolie was there. Simon could have been, but he was doing his record. He was just like me when I was his age. I'm doing my record, Dad. I'll be thinking of you. But Jolie wasn't going to miss this for the world. She's an actress and she's never been to the Oscars, and she wanted to be there. And of course Hillary, my agent, and Oriane and Lily all had a sort of, what are we going to wear? What are we going to wear? It was fantastic. It was like, all I wanted to do was just go and either get it or not get it and come home, I'll never forget it. It was that moment when she opened the envelope and said, and the Oscar goes to... I was expecting R. But when it was I thought, my God, I can't believe this is happening. And, Phil Collins, You'll Be in My Heart from Tarzan. I could see Jodie was like, yeah, and Lily was up on her feet and Oriane was up on her bed, and everyone was crying, and I could see them, but I couldn't get to them. So anyway, then of course they whisk you off to do the interviews, and I thought, it's going to be an hour before I get to see them. And the Disney press lady, bless her heart, she went and got them out of the audience. So after the first little bit of press, they came in, which is when all the tears died. But I was very, very surprised and very, very proud, but surprised more than proud. I did a benefit in LA, Carousel of Hope, for diabetes, and in my set that I did The Way You Look Tonight. And Quincy Jones came up to me after the show and he said, man, you can sing that shit. I said, well, yeah, I like doing bits of different things. He said, I'm doing a record. You're going to have to sing something on this record. So he sent me a list of options, and one of them was Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me, Duke Ellington tune. And I recorded it, in my shack, in my house across the lake, the vocal, and it came out on his Juke's Joint album. Juke Joint. Q's Juke Joint, that's right. But he said, you should do this. You should do this. We should do an album of this. And I think around that time, it just seemed to me that I was ready for it. There comes a point where you really, you become ready for something, and it's a mature music that you really have to play well. Otherwise, you got to forget about it. Our first gig with the big band was the Albert Hall with the Queen, the Royal Family, the government, Nelson Mandela, the cast of thousands. Our first gig was that. So I went on stage, never having played this music before in front of an audience, in front of that, and it went all right. And then then we went on tour with it, and You know, Quincy conducted us, Tony sang with us, and it was a little bit of magic, really. The song is really just, all of my life I've been this. I've been saying sorry for things that I shouldn't have done, you know. It's just, it is a song of looking back and regret. The last verse is about my dad, you know. I mean, I just, and I see it with Simon now, that he's doing his thing, and that's exactly what I was doing when I was his age. But now I know that we should pay attention, because certain people won't be there forever. And certain people are growing up without having a lot of contact with their brother or their sister or whatever, you know. That thing must be, we have to be reminded of that. And when you're young, you don't think about it. And so every time, I mean, my mum would be working or doing something, and he'd come home, and, you know, she'd have fixed him dinner, but he would come home and you know, this didn't happen all the time, but obviously, you know, he'd be sitting there watching television, and I could have been with him, finding out things. What was that like, you know? How did we get here? Stories which I'm now finding out from my mother and from my brother and my sister. But I didn't do it. I was just like, music, music, music. So I used to go upstairs and play my records or play the drums, and really missed out on all that. Sorry about that. I took my license. You have to have a license to drive the boat here, to handle a boat, and because I don't want just anybody doing it, I suppose, because life revolves around the lake, what with sailing and fishing and motorboats. So I took my license as soon as I moved here. Me and Oriane had, you know, we went out on our little boat that I bought, a little bit smaller than this, one engine, this has got two, but. And in all kinds of weather, we went out and took our practical test, did the theory test, which is a written test, and we both passed with flying colours, fortunately. But I was on tour in Australia actually with Oriane, and we used to practice our knots together. And I used to leave the rope hanging around in the room, you know. Often wonder what the maids thought. Well, I was brought up on boats, you know. I mean, my father and mother had boats pretty much all their lives. And my father wanted to run away to sea and wasn't allowed to by his dad. He was made to go to the City of London and work in an office for 40 years. So it's kind of always, water has always been in the blood, if you know what I mean. And my brother and sister and I all were cadets of the Richmond Yacht Club, and now I'm honorary president because of the history. My mum, my dad, my brother, sister, kind of been part of it all their lives, and also my uncles that started me with my drum kit when I was 5 years old. They were lifelong members of the club, so they decided to make me president, and I'm very proud to be, you know, president of that club because of the memories that it has for the family. You know. But I get, it's just the complete opposite of everything I do. You know, a lot of people, a lot of my friends like whizzing around, wakeboarding, water skiing, and I enjoy it. I love water skiing, but I also enjoy just sitting out here when the opportunity arises, which isn't all the time, but when I can, just to come out here with a book. And one day actually I came out here and I fell asleep, and I wasn't anchored, you know, and I ended up waking up suddenly, and I was at 10 feet away from the shore. But, you know, when you wake up like that, Jesus, you know, it was right next to the shore. But it's very relaxing, you know. And of course there's other things you can do, but I mean, sometimes it's nice to do nothing.
When we put in an ad, you know, I was taking a lot of the phone calls, and I remember he said he'd been with his band Flaming Youth, which sounded sort of very poppy, and then he said that he'd played with George Harrison, and that of course impressed me and the others a lot, but we found out later it was actually he played tambourine on a George Harrison session, but anyway, it did the trick. In the early days of Genesis, each summer they couldn't get us arrested in England, in the summertime especially, so they'd pack us off to Italy which was always crazy, badly organised, but wonderful, great people, great food. And we had difficult but wonderful times. And that was part of the initiation and process of getting to know Phil. I clicked with him too because he had a great sense of humour, made me laugh a lot. And you know, sometimes I remember at some gigs, he and I would be sitting away in the corner, bashing away at pianos, thinking, oh, one day our day will come. We had, say, 3 12-string guitars, which were always going out of tune, which would mean they would be noodling around, tuning up, while I was left, you know, the Pratt in the middle of the stage, left trying to occupy the audience. So I started telling stories then, and that developed a bit from there. But and then the next stage on from that for me was to try and illustrate some of the songs with costumes or masks or acting out stuff. And this, while definitely going down well with audiences, did not go down well with the rest of the band sometimes. And so we'd have these situations, you know, where I'd have ideas for how to do things visually, and knowing that I was going to get into rows with everybody, I just would work on these on my own, and then I'd arrive. At the time, it was quite shocking, I think, and there was a sort of hushed silence, not only from the audience, but also from the band. And yeah, and Phil was not a fan of any of that stuff, really, I don't think. But it did help get us separated from a lot of others, and we had an audience that started getting excited by that. I always felt that as it was a collection of songwriters as against a collection of musicians, that the band did stand a very good chance to continue. So I think it's, in a sort of strange way, I was much more confident for them than they were for themselves at the time. And then when they couldn't find someone and went with Phil, I mean, I actually, again, thought that that was going to work. I mean, I think it took a while for Phil to get comfortable being up front, but clearly he had the ability with the singing. I mean, and already, you know, he'd been part of the vocal sound that people had got to know and in some cases love. So I think it was much easier for him to do it than for anyone else.
Before Phil joined, we set out originally to be songwriters, the original 4-piece, and with a changing array of drummers, which was obviously Mike and I, with Anthony Phillips and Peter Gabriel. And we tried to sort of, found that no one was prepared to record our songs, that the only way we could do it was to record them ourselves. And so we started off by doing that in about 1970. And after doing that for a few months, our guitarist at the time, Anthony Phillips, decided he couldn't take it any longer. And so at that point we decided to restructure the band, get a new drummer and everything. And that's when we auditioned for Phil.
We auditioned for Phil at Peter Gabriel's house, his parents' house. And I know Phil came down with Ronnie Carroll, who's now playing with Phil again, actually. They were old mates. And I know after when they were driving away, I remember apparently the story goes, Ronnie says to Phil, "God, well, you blew that one, mate. I got the gig and you haven't." And it turned out that Phil got it and Ronnie hadn't. It was a summer's day, I remember it, and I thought I was in a pair of swimming trunks, I think. But
I don't remember.
Could be swimming trunks and a dressing gown. But it was I must admit, if I was going for an audition at that stage in a band and I went to someone's house, parents' house like that, it was a lovely sort of farm in the country near Woking and hanging out by the swimming pool, I'm sure he thought it was going to be a really nice, easygoing band, and then as soon as he joined, we went on the road in the back of the van for the next 5 years, so it wasn't quite how he saw it, I don't think.
A lot of tapes were sent in and we'd listen to people who thought might be suitable. And the thing about, we never really thought about Phil for lots of reasons. One was we weren't sure his voice could cope with the range that we required. But most important of all, I didn't think he'd want to do it, because it changes your life, and we knew that.
The one thing he wasn't was pushing for it. I didn't feel that, you know what I mean? I think the doubts we had, he had the same doubts too, you know what I mean? And his voice was always, at that time, quite pure. And as Tony said, he weren't sure he could find that kind of rough edge that Peter had and some of the songs needed. As it turned out, within a couple of years, hammering around the world, he soon got it, didn't he?
He did indeed, yes.
And a very good sort of rough edge too.
I remember the first gig very well, actually, because I remember looking up.
Where was it?
It was London, Ontario, wasn't it? Yeah, see. At least that's what I've read. No, I was playing, I was so used to looking up and seeing Pete, and things like that, and I was looking up and see Phil, and for a start, as you know, he's a lot shorter, and he was wearing, I think he was wearing some sort of Hawaiian shirt or something, wasn't he? It's my memory anyhow. And it just looked very unlikely, and I thought the first song I thought, God, this is weird, this I don't know about this at all. And then I could just see the way, when he was talking to the audience, the way they responded, and they, when they laughed at his jokes, they kind of laughed with a kind of warmth. And I felt, what I realised at that point was the audience really wanted to like him.
I remember seeing Phil after the first song, and he had a little bit of paper with his, what he was going to say, or outlined on a bit of paper, and I saw this hand, right, and the white paper was shaking like this, for the first introduction. And then by the time the second one came, or the third one came, it kind of, his hand steadied. So I thought, we're going to be okay then.
I think when Phil came in, he started to write a little bit more, which happened on the album Duke. What was good really was just the change just by having a third person, kind of, it changed everything a little bit. And I think he introduced a slightly different element, a slightly more direct approach at times, which we could either use on its own or else kind of incorporate in one of the more complicated kind of songs. As well as always still being a great drummer and being able to influence a lot in that way. I think what happened more was his confidence grew and he was able to contribute more to the band. Prior to that, I think he was a little bit sort of hesitant about putting forward his own ideas. And there's no doubt having success on his own obviously meant that he felt more confident about his own writing, which is a very important thing. And I think one of the most significant things that occurred during that period was his writing as a lyricist. And whereas before his earlier lyrics were not the greatest. Once he sort of found a kind of way to write, he sort of could write really good lyrics, I think, on so many subjects. He liked to stay in the real world, whereas we'd sort of worked in the fantasy land a bit more before that. And I think that was a great contribution, really, a great change that had sort of occurred, and he was able to kind of write in a way that sounded very natural.
I reckon the reason we've survived so long, or did survive so long, really, was because we never had a master plan, like do this, do that. Our manager did, but we just sort of did it one album at a time, really, I think, and reconvened from the next one. So when something like Phil's problems with his relationship and his marriage and his family came along, and he said he wanted to move to Canada for a long period of time, I think we just sort of, you go with the flow a little bit, you know what I mean? He gave us more time to start doing some solo stuff we sort of started. So that was kind of fine. I think we've always been, as a band, in a funny way, quite adaptable, I think.
I think obviously he took great solace in sort of in the music, and that's when he started writing on his own, and he was able to express, feelings through the lyrics and stuff, which I think helped him quite a bit. But there's no doubt that he was having some tough times. But when he's with us a lot of the time, I mean, it's what blokes are like when they're together. They don't necessarily talk about these things very much, so you kind of carry through. And I think the music obviously was a big distraction, which was a very important part of his life.
If I remember rightly, we were in the middle of Abacab. We were in the middle of the album when the band album, when his thing came out. I remember the single going to number 4, I think, in the first week, and it was fantastic. I don't know, it sounds odd to say now, but we still seem a bit removed from it, funnily enough. Okay, he had to go and do some stuff, but until the album was finished, he was pretty much locked in by a bit of promo and stuff to making the album. It wasn't until the album was finished, really, that he kind of went mad. And then the next few years, it went that way. So I think over the next year, to be honest, I think when we came out to the next album, it occurred to me after the huge success of Face Value, you might not want to do it. Which I would have understood, you know what I mean? He got a fantastic solo career. But somehow, people never seem to understand it, really. We seem to get back together again each time after his sort of huge solo success. And it kind of felt the same. I mean, I know it sounds a bit odd to say, and people never believe me, I'm sure, when I say that, but it didn't change anything, really. We were the same sort of guys. It didn't come in any different, a bit like, I've had a lot of success, guys. I'm in charge. You know, it didn't change the balance that we had as three individual guys together.
I think, as I said before, really, what tended to happen, I think, to a large extent, was that the group became more even. The three of us sort of, equal partners, as it were. Because there's no doubt that when Phil originally took over the vocals, he was slightly the junior party because he'd sort of joined later. I know it seems ridiculous, only about a year or two after the band had formed, but it still felt like that. I think it felt like that to him. And I think that made it much easier. And we all had our strengths as well. I mean, Phil definitely is quite strong, sort of with sound ideas and things. So you'd kind of, each person would dominate in the area which they were best at, I felt. And obviously you'd have areas which you'd share, like lyrics and the writing of the music and stuff. So it worked out really well, I think. And I think some of those albums, I mean, particularly for me, making Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance was some of the most fun we ever had. I mean, talking about Phil's aspect of the touring, I think he found touring with Genesis actually quite difficult, in fact. I think the sort of fun we had was much more in the studio and everything. I think on the road, he got to the stage where he was getting so worried about his voice all the time, protecting it. And he knew that if a show was cancelled, what it meant, the number of people it would affect and everything. And, he had all these sort of compromised vocal lines he could do to try and save his voice a bit. And it's a bit like sometimes every morning when you'd see him, sort of, how's your voice feel? And there's sort of virtually no voice, and you think, is he going to be able to sing tonight or not? And I think he felt that was quite a pressure.
Well, that kind of pressure being to do with the voice when you're on tour, I mean, I think that's horrible. I think it's really hard. It ruins the day. The other singer's whole, really. You're on tour, there's 300 blokes and lorries and crew and technicians, they're building stages, there's 7,000 people about to walk in the stadium, you know what I mean? And you're going, trying to clear your voice, and there's no voice there at all, And inside, I'm sure he's wanting to say, listen, guys, I haven't got a hope in hell of doing it. Outside, he's sort of trying to say, well, I'll give it a try. So it must be a horrible sort of conflict of trying to balance the two. That is hard, I think, and that did spoil some of the aspect, I think, for Phil especially, because, on nights off, we were kind of carefree, had a good old time, and he had to sort of go to bed early a lot, and worry about his voice. No, he used to. No, he'd listen to the tapes. We all did a bit, but he used to listen to them a lot more than I did. No, obviously when you hear the tape, there's no point in listening without making notes about comments about how to make things better. And I'm sure that a little note would go under the sound man's door, and which is fine. You know what I mean? That's because that's what you do. I never got a note under my door. I didn't think about that. No.
I think he knows what would have happened if he'd done that.
We're on tour in Japan. I go to the Roland factory, because I'm into gear and stuff and know about these drum machines. And I go to a little house in the middle of Tokyo, and I buy these 3 drum machines, like numbers sort of 4, 5, and 6. I mean, I'm cutting edge here. I come back to the hotel, and I'm so excited, and I say, I bought one for you, Tony, one for you, Phil. But pay me for them, pay me back. And he was like, oh, okay. And Phil was basically saying, I'm a drummer. I'm not sure why I want this. And I was so upset with the lack of reaction. I really thought I'd been cutting edge, got these 3 machines, they're going to be great. And I got a bit of a sort of, all right then. But as you know, I mean, Phil was the first one to really use them to the best advantage, and they became a big part of our life.
He did indeed.
There you go.
Yeah.
He probably still owe me for it, actually.
Probably.
So does Philip probably. Still owe me for the machine. But I mean, I look back over, especially the 80s, which was, as Tony said, a very busy time, but it was a great time for us, really. I don't know, we just seemed to have an awful lot of laughter. I mean, one thing I miss really now, out of all the things, now that we're not with Phil anymore, you miss the touring, you miss the writing, but you kind of miss the kind of hanging out. We used to have an amazing, when you're just laughing your head off and you can't stop. We sort of had a thing, we kind of vibe each other up when we were together. You kind of miss that. I kind of miss that almost most of all.
When I heard that Phil was writing something, I didn't know even if he could. It was one of these things that I heard him sing with the group and play. He's a great musician, and also, he wrote only one song called "More Fool Me" on Selling in England by the Pound, and then he would co-wrote a few things here and there, but I thought, what is he going to do on his own? And I remember the first time I heard In the Air Tonight was he had a demo, and I was going back into London after rehearsals at, I think, Shepperton Studios, and he says, I'll give you a ride back into town, because he was going into town, and I thought this would be interesting. And he had 2 songs that were demoed with drum machine and keyboards and his voice, and he put on In the Air Tonight. And as I heard this song, I was thinking, I didn't know this guy could write music at all. I was very impressed with the first time I heard it, and I thought, oh my God, this guy's going to be able to go on his own. And I also thought to myself, if he goes on his own, what's going to happen with Genesis? And, well, obviously they were able to balance both out as it went on. And then I got to play on those songs, which I was really happy about. We went on the road in 1985. I believe it was our 1985 No Jacket Required tour. And we were playing certain venues, and I think no one expected these things to sell out as much as they did. First of all, no one expected No Jacket Required to be as big of a record as it turned out to be. None of us. I think the fact that he was different than Genesis helped him too. I mean, Genesis being a great group by themselves, but he still came out there and was able to do it by himself. I think you heard his personality come through his music. I mean, that voice that he has is just, it feels like you know the guy. Now, I do know him, but if I didn't know him, I would feel like I knew him. That sound, it's just very unique.
Make sure everything's done, because he hates failure. He hates anybody slacking, and just not being on the ball. So if you're going to sort of play hard, you've got to be responsible enough to get up in the morning and get your job done. If not, I think it's good night, Irene.
He's a total pro, and he just wants everything spot on. And, he works 110% and he expects 110% off everybody else, and it's good. Keeps you on your toes, and it's worth doing, if it's worth doing right.
He was big, I mean, you couldn't go anywhere, do anything. We lived in the hotel rooms. You just couldn't go out, especially if you went to Latin countries, it was crazy. Argentina was madness. But it was fun. I mean, when you pull up at a hotel and thousands of people, and you do feel part of it, although you're only working, you do feel part of it, you kind of get wrapped up in it. But it was ginormous. You just couldn't go out. I mean, you couldn't sit down and physically eat a meal, because they were around everybody, from waiters as well, but people sitting at other tables in between spoonfuls would come up for autographs and they'd be yelling. It was just not feasible to leave the hotel room and function correctly anyway. So it was out of back doors, through kitchens, little elevators where the staff come up and down, and that's how we manoeuvred around the world.
We were doing the Dancing at the Light album in France. We'd rented a chateau. And one day he calls Danny, he says, Danny, can you book me a room at the Beau Rivage in Lausanne? It was the first anniversary of him and Oriane meeting. And I would like a bouquet of flowers, 2 bottles of Dom Perignon, and a card saying, to Oriane, I love you, Phil. So Danny's organising it, and I'm just sitting.
I love you, me.
No, he said, I love you, Phil. It was so.
Oh yes, you're right.
Danny was organising it, and I was sort of eavesdropping, and I realised he's having a problem, with the translation, and he's saying, no, I am Danny, I'm not coming. No, it's Phil Collins and Oriane. Right, okay. I want a bottle of Dom Perignon and bouquet of flowers. Okay. No, I'm Danny. I'm not coming. The card is from Phil to Oriane. Okay. And I thought, this is going to go horribly wrong, So the next day, Phil comes in. I'm sitting eating my breakfast. I got a mouthful of baked beans. And he throws this card down in front of me. He goes, read that. And it's like, it says, to Phil, I love you, Danny. In the meantime, Danny's door was just down the corridor from the breakfast room, and he knocks the door and shows the card to Danny, and he says, what's this? And Danny reads, he goes, well, I do. I have to let you into a little secret. I write the music and Danny writes the lyrics.
I do most of the lyrics anyway.
He does most of them.
He helps me sometimes, but Yeah, see, the writing of that's one of the big things, downers about him, that he doesn't write anything.
No. And
we do. Mind you, we get our points, don't we?
no, we get pints.
Oh, pints.
I thought he said he'd give us 2 points on each album, but it was
Pints,
2 pints.
yeah.
Yeah. I think he's a genuine, hard-working, talented boss, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say the same, but
And a good friend.
I was going to
you know.
say, you know, that
You know,
above all, I mean, he's my daughter's godfather, and above all, a great friend.
Had Phil been a lousy drummer, there's no way I would have done it. It was like, you know what, this is not worth the effort. But the way he played was pretty fascinating, and he was so musical, and it was such a fresh approach to anything that I'd really ever done that it was kind of nice to do. It was like sort of stepping in someone else's shoes for a while, you know. We have a lot of the same early influences, a lot of the more famous jazz drummers, okay? And his reaction to some of that, and especially his reaction to the Motown drummers, some of the Phil Spector arrangements, things like that, you know, the American things. I think his take on it, filtered through his English background, has given him a truly unique sound. And because he wasn't a highly technically trained drummer, he came up with ways to do these incredible things, which just made him really unique, you know. And some of it brings a real edge in his playing that's really dynamic. I've learned to, you know, whatever I do, I just instinctively find the easier way to stick it and play it, you know, to make it, you know, easier. Him not doing that, in some cases, added a certain tension to his playing, which I think translates really well. Anyone that works with Phil for any length of time, I mean, there have been some situations, I guess, where there was tension. But I think anyone that's survived with Phil knows to just come prepared to give it all. You know, I don't think Phil can conceive of working, you know, of giving less than 110%. I don't think it's in his character to do that.
I thought Phil was really good. Really, really good. Because one or two other people in the rock business had done films around that time. Not very good. And he was fantastic. I thought this is it was like working with a proper actor. It was lovely to do. The whole film was lovely to do. But I was pregnant at the time. My daughter's now 14. So I was pregnant at the time. And when we first started to rehearse it, the producers had said to me, I didn't know, and we had actually started rehearsing. I said, I just found out. So I said, I'm pregnant to the producer, and she said, don't tell anyone, because they didn't know quite, I suppose they didn't know how it affected insurance and things. I don't know, but they said, just keep it quiet. Anyway, I had the most appalling morning sickness. So we got into this little rehearsal room, and we were rehearsing things like the love scenes and things between us. And I was sort of going greedy. I'd have, excuse me, having to rush out to the loo. To be sick, so that I'm going to have to tell Phil. He's going to think, you know, that I've got this terrible adverse reaction to him. You know, Phil brought the ordinary guy to it, and also he is a bit of a cheeky chap, you know. And that sounds naff, but I mean he is, you know, he's sort of cheeky, and so he had those qualities which were perfect. They're sort of innate in it. Oh, going on the beach at Cannes, I've never experienced anything like that. On the beach at Cannes, when millions of people turned up because of Phil. We were going to actually promote it. I mean, I thought, my God, it was almost frightening. There were so many. I've never seen thousands of people turn up to see one person. It was scary, actually.
Phil has always looked like shite. You know, let's face it, he's a middle-aged bald cunt, you know. So what can we do about that? Very little, you know. And the admirable thing about him is that he never tried to hide it, you know. And plus he's a drummer, you know, it's all negatives. I always got the impression that he was sort of a wag, you know. I mean, he never seemed to take it that seriously, you know. And I like that anyway. You know, and of course, aside from the singing drummer syndrome, which, you know, I'm of course against anyway, you know, as a given, as an ideological stand almost, you know, I just liked his thing, which was so non-pop star. And that's probably the thing that I thought the song was good, and then he had so many hits that people were saying, oh, for Christ's sake, Phil Collins, But I kind of kept thinking, like, he's very cool with all this stuff, And the non-stop work ethic, he seemed to be everywhere all the time, And so they're the things that impinged upon me. Either, I don't know whether Midge told me Phil was coming or someone told me, and but I remember Midge saying, Phil's coming. I said, cool. And he said, but he wants to do the drums, he wants to do real drums on it. It's going to take all fucking afternoon. And I thought, oh no, this is going to be a complete cock-up, because drummers are a pain, they take forever. There's not just one guitar, there's like 50 drums. They all got to be mic'd, and they're precious about each bloody sound and tuning, And so they arrived, and Midge sort of said to Phil, he said, okay, we need to get on with the. He said 15 minutes, one take. I remember this really well. So the kit was set up, and next minute, he goes, it was so loud and so on it, so strong, he hits it so hard. And we were in the recording room, the mixing desk, and Phil was listening to the track with the electronic drums, and next minute, that specific sound that he had, which is big, it's a big drum sound, and he got it in seconds. I mean, it takes days, and he got it in seconds, and there it was, the Phil Collins sound, and it just lifted the track onto another area, I mean, really good, and we just remember to go, yeah, cool, and then his voice singing with the thing anyway. I mean, a major contribution, and totally into it, utterly committed to it, totally understanding of it, wanting to be there, loving being there. It was cool. Why would you knock Phil? He's completely unstarry. He's hail fellow well met. He's a laugh. He takes a very ironic view of himself. But, it's so big, the thing, that's the target, not him. And if he's reading his reviews, good, bad, or indifferent, he's an idiot. All musicians that I know think he's a great guy, a lovely man. And, put the music aside, when you wrap the whole thing up, not bad. If somebody says, fucking great guy, Phil, that's it.
I loved him as a drummer, as a songwriter, singer, everything. He was just so musical. And then in Montreux one year, I guess it was in 1996, we finally got him really seduced with this big band. Everybody was working on him, and he loved big band music because he's a great drummer. And once a man buys his bandstands with his name on it, he's hooked. It's over. He's a junkie after that. And it was very brave of him the night that we played at the Hollywood Bowl, because he was serious. He was said to the audience, and there must have been 13,000 people there. He says, if you're nice, I might sing too. Just might sing 2 songs. And they thought he was kidding. They didn't think he was going to sit there with a big jazz band and play jazz songs all night long. But that's what he did. I applauded the audience that night. I said, 200 or 300 walked out, real hardcore rock and rollers, but the other 12,700 stayed there, and they had a ride of their life, because they went on a trip. You trusted Phil, take a look at me now, and all these other things, And so studio, hey, go trust the same man that you trusted before. Take the trip, and they had a ball. It was a very enlightening night, I think, for everybody. I love Phil's lyrics. I listen. Whatever he does, he's going to do okay, because once you have the attitude, it doesn't matter what you apply it to. If you met to singing or to drums or to songwriting or whatever, or jazz drummer, it's the same commitment and the same determination to just take it to the top.
We were making at Disney Animation an animated version of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan. And we knew we wanted it to be a musical, but we weren't sure how to musicalize it. Of course, we'd done The Lion King, and people sort of sensed what that Elton John sound was. We wanted something different than that, and we'd made Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, those fabulous songs by Alan Menken, and people knew that. We wanted something fresh for Tarzan. And actually, Chris Montan, our music producer, who's worked with me on all of our animated films, came up with the idea of Phil Collins, mostly because of the sense of fantastic rhythm and fantastic percussion. The first thing was meeting with Phil in Geneva. And that day we sat down and took him through what our story was. The directors pitched the story, and Chris Montan and I talked about how the process would work. Because of course the directors hadn't gone through this before with someone, but Chris and I had done this with Alan Menken, we had done it with certainly Elton John, we had done it a bit with Sting, so we kind of had been in this game already. And we took him through what we thought the process would be. One thing that I think almost no one understands is that when we went to Phil, the idea was not that Phil would sing his own songs in the movie. In fact, that developed through the process. The thought was that Phil would write songs to be sung by the characters. We always knew we did not want the character of Tarzan to sing, and knew that we would be singing, in a sense, over the action for him, as you see in the movie now, that his mouth wouldn't open and sing, but we thought everyone else would. And in fact, that's how we started. When Phil began writing, his demos were so fantastic that Chris and I said, how can we leave these out of the movie? People will want to hear Phil's voice. And it really evolved from hearing his demos. The most surprising thing about Phil is that other songwriters they'll take the moment of the show that we want the song in. They write a complete demo and then submit it. What Phil would do is bring in fragments. He'd say, I'm thinking about a rhythm like this, I'm thinking about a sound like this, here's my lyric. And then he would present ideas that we could talk about, and then he would go away and fully realize the song. I remember the two first songs of Tarzan that were played for me was You'll Be in My Heart and Son of Man. And I found both of them. So I actually, on You'll Be in My Heart, I heard his first demo. I was on an airplane. Chris Montan handed me a set of headphones and said, listen to this, I just got it in a FedEx packet before we had taken off. And I put it on and I started to cry. My favorite Phil stuff, I suppose, I have to say really is Tarzan, only because it's the songs that I have the greatest emotional connection with. And the joy of sitting with him, listening to him sing them, that moves me a great deal. My time knowing Phil Collins has been a period of family life for Phil. So the first thing I'd say is he's a family man. Dedicated to family, wanting to be with his family, and in a sense wanting to make family around him. He's easygoing, very smart, wants to be heard. It's an interesting thing for a percussionist. Absolutely wants to be heard, and is probably a deeper man in every regard than most people think of him. I think his image is, he's a nice bloke. And he's a very smart, very savvy, well-informed, deeply feeling man.
I actually collected an award for him before I ever met him. Now I got this woman phoned me up and said, look, Phil's got an award and he can't be there, he's doing a concert, and he really thinks that you and he look alike. Do you think you could go and collect the award for him? What, do you think people are going to believe that I'm Phil Collins? And no, but it'd be very nice if you did. So I did, and I was quite honoured. He's not the sort of preening, sort of parade horse that sort of a lot of pop stars are. Like this sort of obligatory vanity that seems to go hand in hand with the job. He's not like that at all. And he just struck me as a really nice bloke. Very down to earth, very straight. Well, it's Phil. He's just Phil. He never tries to be anything else than what he is. And what he is a brilliant musician, songwriter and actor, and a nice bloke.
to be honest, I mean, the situation was, it was very complicated, and so I thought, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen? But to be honest, he was very frank with me, and he came straight with me, so he was not like he was on two situations, you know, so he was very frank, and, you know, we spoke so many times on the phone. I think we spoke about 7 times a day, and, you know, I mean, for the first week, because I was working and he was away, and I met him the next weekend, and you know, you just fall in love with the person on the phone, because we speak so many times. I think about 3 hours a day on the phone, you know, and you get to know each other, and then we move in a little house in Hermance in September.
But am I an easy person to get to know?
Yes, you are. You're very easy to get to know.
I tend to wear. I tend to be
honest.
very honest, actually. I mean, I kind of feel that life is too short to be anything other than honest, you know, in the end. And I try to be honest about situations, about, you know, things that happen in daily life, you know, but try to.
I mean, he was very frank with me and say, you know, I have lots of luggage, and this is my luggage, so you take me or you leave me, you know, and that's it, you know. I mean, he never lie about anything. He always tell you the truth, and we get on with it.
This right here is the first time she's ever talked about this. It's the first time we've ever sat as a couple in front of a camera to talk about it. We've always avoided it. She's never done any interviews. We've been asked, God knows we've been asked, to put the record straight, you know. And I think, you know, in this whole thing, there was some untruths said, there were some misconceptions said, made rather, and there were some things printed which were way off. I mean, you know, we all know what lies and misrepresentations are made in the press about things we know about. So you can, you know, put that into our situation. You can imagine, you know, she would pick up a paper, or I would pick up a paper in England or on tour and find out, you know, this bimbo. And there was a kind of character assassination really by a lot of people of her, because she was apparently going to be splitting my marriage up. And as I said, you know...
No, I think you can't, I mean, you can't arrive in the life of someone, a nice couple, and just say, okay, you know, I'm here, take me. I think it's impossible. I mean, a couple has to be not okay, otherwise it could never happen.
For a long time, you know, for a long time, my marriage was fine. It was great. My marriage was great. I had Lily. We had Lily. And then things started to go wrong. And when they go wrong, they can go wrong and then right, or they can go wrong and stay wrong. And so, you know, that was something that she didn't break my marriage up. It was something that was happening. But it was very difficult. And this is the first time we've talked about it. And, you know, it's kind of, it's strange to be even talking about it in front of people, but it's, you know, it's true. It's life. It's reality. So you got to deal with it.
We have a great relationship together. We are very good friends. We build stuff together. And now we have a lovely little boy. And I think this is what life is about. But you can't really mind of what people think, because they will never know, you know, because they're not in your position.
I have always tried to do the right thing. I've never really, ever, in my memory, consciously been pleased about messing up. You know, I haven't meant to do anything that may have hurt my kids or may have hurt my first 2, you know, relationships. They've been great mothers to the kids. That's why the kids are so great now. You know, I realise that. And you know, obviously Oriane's influence on them for the last 8 years. I mean, she's known Lily for 8 of her 13 years. You know, and Lily has loved her from the day she met her. I mean, she ran straight up to her, put her arms around her, because I'd said that she looked like Jasmine from Aladdin, you know, and Lily kind of knew what that meant. Oh, I know what she looks like. And when she saw her, she just looked, you know. But it was kind of, you know, I've been very lucky in the way everything's turned out. And I've got wonderful children. I've got a wonderful wife, and dog's all right. And I've got lots to look forward to musically and family-wise, you know, personally. There are certain things that I've never been able to enjoy not doing things. And, you know, taking holidays or more breaks or you know, we go away for weekends to Rome or Venice, or we did before Nick was born, but, you know, go away for long weekends just to see the place, you know, just to have a weekend away. And I never did that before. I mean, for no one's fault but mine, you know, I just never thought of it. I very rarely would sit down by the pool and read a book, you know, and or go out on the boat and turn the engine off and maybe have a glass of wine or a glass of beer and read a book. And it's things like that that I've learnt, you know, and I guess that comes at a certain point in your life when you realise that there is actually more to life than just work. And maybe I should have learnt that a long time ago. But for me, it's been a natural evolution, a natural thing, and it's come at the right time, you know.
My dad is probably one of the most down-to-earth people I know. He's very grounded. His home life is very quiet and grounded. My dad used to love reading us stories. That was his thing. I mean, he used to read all the Mr. Men by Roger Hargreaves. I had the whole collection, and me and my brother used to sit there. My dad used to love reading stories to us. Now, there were times when he wasn't there and he was on the road, but when he was at home, he was a real dad. And my dad always loved to do the dishes. That's his thing, and he still does to this day. My mum used to cook, my dad did the dishes. It's definitely hard when one of your parents goes away for long periods of time because you're constantly making those adjustments. And you do see the strain that it makes on one of your parents when they're trying to take care of 2 kids, 2 dogs, a house. And my mum, in that sense, was solid like a rock. She really was. And, you know, we did go through hard times, but I know that both of my parents always did their best. But yeah, I mean, I do remember missing my dad. He was careful in where he picked his time to take time off, you know. And I know he did his best to be there for certain events and certain holidays and occasions. My dad thought Randy Newman was going to get it. My dad had absolutely no idea he was going to get it. I had a pretty good feeling in my stomach, but, you know, you're never sure what's going to happen. And I just remember sitting in the limousine and looking at my dad, and we both just started laughing. And I was like, "This is it, Dad, you're gonna get it." And he was like, no. And when they said his name, I felt like someone had just, like, you know, released the balloon, the air. I've been holding my breath, we all had for a long time, not sure. I know that weighed on him. I know that he really wanted to win that award. And I was bawling. I was so proud of my dad. He doesn't like to get caught up in the hype of everything. I think he finds it kind of almost embarrassing, you know. My dad, in that sense, is just very simple and very grounded. He loves to do what he does, and obviously being given credit for it, and have people love it and enjoy it. But the whole entertainment side of it, the sparkle glamour side of it, he's not into that. You know, he's not a flash person. He's one car, one home, down to earth kind of guy. Likes to keep it simple. I know that my dad is just really happy, you know, and I know Oriane's a big part of that, and where his relationships are with me and Simon and Lily are a big part of that. He's, like I said, he just seems the happiest I've ever seen him.
I just remember this one moment. We were in Quebec City, and he'd never played Quebec City before, ever. I think he might have done it back in '79 with Genesis or something, you know. So basically, the crowd were nuts anyways. After that, In the Air Tonight, the last beat done, it was like a 15-minute standing ovation. And it was just unbelievable. At that point, I realized this man is loved and respected to a point where I can't even fucking fathom it. It's unbelievable. I mean, it moved me to tears as well, because I just couldn't believe how loved this person was, and this guy's my dad, you know? And it was a real eye-opener. Whatever room he walked into, he couldn't help himself but to clean up. It's not his mess. He doesn't have to clean that up. But he felt compelled to do it, so okay, fine. But, you know, I never took that for granted, you know. But still to this day, and I respect it because I do the same thing when I have guests in my house. You know, I'm still, although I'm 25 years old, he still tells me to make my bed and fold the towels neatly after you're finished and all this stuff. And I do that anyways, but it's just the fact that it's just the dad in him. He has to do that. It's his day gig, you know? And he doesn't see me very often, so when he does, he wants to play a bit of dad, and that's cool. You know, if me and him have a phone conversation, and something just, the end of the conversation just doesn't end right. I get the same thing. This is funny because we both actually have thought the same thing before. Sometimes I think the phone conversation hasn't ended right, and I'm like, is everything okay with him? Is he upset with me? And I want to call him back, but I don't, because I'm sure that I'm just being overly paranoid or whatever, overly sensitive. And I've never actually called him back and said, is everything okay? You know, but I've always wanted to. And the other day he did that, and I was like, wow. I was like, Dad, I've wanted to do that many times. He's like, yeah, well, I just had the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Is everything okay? And he's just as unsure sometimes about our friendship as I am. I was always, you know, in a way, somewhat intimidated by him. In a way, in a fatherly way, but also in the way that he was a big, huge pop star. And I know that sounds kind of weird coming from me, but it all kind of affects you subconsciously in a way. And you know, I think he's, as I said before, he's taking more time to listen and to really kind of absorb, taking more time to really enjoy, you know, he's taking more time to enjoy all the work and hard work that he's put in over the years. I think he's finally able to relax, and with that, he's let a lot of his guards down, a lot of his barriers down, and I think he's just overall a happier person.
I know when Dad died, Phil was away, and it really was a huge blow to Phil. You know, his dad had died when he wasn't around, and he was on tour, and you know, it was totally unexpected. And I think he was close to Dad. We were all close to Dad. I mean, being the youngest, and it was, you know, I felt very sorry for Phil. You know, he took it very, very hard. The Royal Festival Hall, yeah, it was an absolute knockout. It really was. It really was. It's much smaller, and I think it's you know, you're reaching people who aren't really interested in what him as Phil Collins was doing on the tours. I think it's, you know, so you got a slightly different audience, I think. But it's knockout, absolutely knockout. It really is. I mean, it's beautiful music. I mean, well, it always was beautiful music, but I had a kick out of seeing my brother playing it. A lot of people I know who weren't interested at all in Phil's rock music, love the big band sound. He's achieved a lot, I think, and you know, it's just he's doing projects he wants to do now, that projects he might have put off a few years back, but now he's doing the projects and he's enjoying doing them, and he's pleased with the results. He's a lot happier. He wasn't unhappy before, but you notice the fact he's happier. That's all. Lots of laughs and jokes. Can't be bad.
He was a fabulous, fabulous child. If you could say somebody was a perfect little boy, that was him. Whereas my older brother and I, we would fight all the time, we'd quarrel. We never did with him. We were both very protective of him because he was lovely. He always did the right thing. It was annoying, really. This one year, I was 12 and Phil was 6, and my mum took us for a week to Butlins at Clacton, and my dad and Clive spent the whole week in the snooker room, and Phil and I went in all the talent competitions. Well, Phil won, got down to the finals rather, and at the Gaiety Theatre, and I can't remember the musical director's name. Eric Robinson or something. And he comes out in his cowboy outfit with his banjo, his little tin banjo, and sang Davy Crockett. And he starts singing, and suddenly he says, excuse me, it's the wrong key. And of course the whole place just collapsed because he was serious. It wasn't part of the act. He was serious. It was not in the right key. So would they please stop and start again? And he won the competition, probably for cheek. I got the record and we heard it before it was released, and I was so made up about it. I mean, we sat in his bedroom, all of us, and the fact that, you know, this picture was on this album cover, and I mean, I was just so proud of him. But I was touring, you see, so I wasn't around. But the rest of the family went to the planetarium for this big launch, and they were lovely boys that were in it. It was really a very happy period in his life, I think. So I think what people do like about him is his sense of humour. And he'll send himself up, and he'll do silly things when he's on stage. And he's a bit unpredictable. And I think what people like about him mostly is the fact that he's like the guy next door. And he could be anybody's brother. You know, he could really... he could live next door to you, and it'd be like living next door to anybody. You know, he'd just do the shopping and everything else, you know.
We had two friends who we used to call Uncle, and they made him a three-piece drum kit. It was, although it was homemade, it was beautifully done, and he played that non-stop. With these three drums, he used to set them all up, and it was a small drum and a snare drum, I think. Am I right? Snare drum?
Far be it from me to correct
anyway,
you.
these three drums, and he used to play, had the record player on with the music, and he used to sit for hours doing that.
But there was, I remember that the first drum Reginald gave me was when I was 3, and that was at Greenford. And then they made this drum kit you're talking about when I was 5.
Yes.
And I used to play it in the living room while everyone was watching television.
That's right.
And then it got too loud and you sent me upstairs.
That's right. I made you go up into your bedroom and play because...
Right. I just want you to say it.
It took over. Your drumming took over. Everything. No television, Phil's drumming. So in the end, my husband and I made him go upstairs to play his drums upstairs, and that wasn't a lot better because he got louder and louder. It's a feeling inside of you. I can only describe it.
She's going to go. She's going. She's going.
I can only describe it. It's terrific because they're saying all these things about him, and well, unless you've had it, you can't describe it. But it is a wonderful feeling when it's not things that you're saying; it's things that other people are saying, and all the world's there to listen to it. It's marvelous. It's difficult to say, but just because he is my son, I'm very thrilled to have him as a son. You know, that sounds very corny, doesn't it? Stupid.
Well, that's what you know. It's a nice thing to say.
But he is a good boy. You do worry about them, but I don't worry about him now. Not at all. Not at all. He's very happy. Happily married, and I have no need to worry. And I've let go of the reins, haven't I?
Yes. Well, you've always been like that.
Well, I've always let you go. Let
me do what I want to do, you know, and encouraged it. That's all you can do. I think that's great.
Yes. When I found out what they all wanted something different, not remotely connected that I let them go ahead. And they knew, I'm sure you did, that I was always there in the background, ready with a helping hand if they needed it. And you have needed it. They've all needed it.